All right, welcome. Wednesday night Bible study, next step. Tonight we're going to be in Genesis 41, but I need a microphone because we have great prayer requests and prayer requests. Sure.
Yeah, I'm thankful to God. My son works with Uber, and so somebody went through a red light, and thankfully he was able to get around them. So I'm very thankful for that. So I have 4 prayer requests tonight, especially for Israel, also for the pastors and elders in the United States, and also the Supreme Court, especially as many things are ending up at the Supreme Court, and that they would, that God would just intervene and help them to make right decisions. And then last of all, for all marriages, I have a friend that's been separated for 1.5 years, and so my heart goes out to him and other marriages like that, that God would intervene in those situations.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I'd like to pray for my wife, Kelly. She's back in the hospital. She had another nervous breakdown. She's got medication-resistant depression. She's going to get, this Friday, she's scheduled to get another ECT. That's where they put her in a seizure. She needs your prayers.
Okay.
Thank you.
Morris.
Just pray for my kids, that they meet godly men or women that come into their life. Pray for our families, the ones that just don't know the Lord, and our government, and all the lost souls.
Morris.
Gary and Ashley come to the second worship service on Sunday morning. We've never prayed for them here, and I don't know why. She just donated one of her kidneys to Gary, and they had the surgery today. Both, I guess, are doing well and a lot of pain. But it's an interesting how they met, and I'm not going to go into that. But she's 27 years old and gave up one of her kidneys for Gary.
We've got an online request from Paul Mays. He says he's having a small surgery on Monday, so he'd like us to remember him in prayer.
Okay.
Paul Mays?
Paul Mays. Oh, you're right. Pastor Dan's sick, fighting the flu. Rachel also. Anybody else? Okay. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Lord, come to you in prayer. I'm not going to go through the list of prayer requests we have. And I'm going to thank you that you're there to answer this prayer request and that you're there to be with us in those moments when we need the prayer. All the moments, the highs, the lows, the good, the bad, because we're there because you want us there. And I thank you for that. I thank you for knowing that, even though I don't always believe it. I thank you for knowing that. All of these prayer requests, we come humbly to you to ask your will, to ask your blessing, to ask that you would heal the sick, that you would comfort the afflicted, that you would reach down and touch someone in those moments of panic and anxiety and pain and fear. And we know that you can do that you do that for us because you're the great physician. You know us. But we thank you not because you make everything better for us, but because you're there with us. You're there bringing us through it in the moment, not afterwards, not any other time, but you're there with us, Lord. And I'm thankful for that. We are thankful for that. We are thankful for what you give us, what you do for us in our day-to-day lives and in the events that unfold moment by moment for us. We thank you that you are there in those moments and that you bless us so richly. All those blessings come from you, and sometimes we forget to say thank you for those. We kind of take them for granted. Pray that you be with us tonight, be with me tonight, be with the word that you've given me tonight. Let me deliver it the way it deserves to be delivered. I thank you. In your name, amen. So we're in Genesis 41 tonight. And I gave an outline, and you guys probably picked it up on the outside there. Maybe you did. Maybe you saw it on Facebook. I don't know that I'm all that thrilled with the outline that I gave you guys, so I'll try to be better than that. But we open up. We're going to walk through this. So 1 through 13 is the initial dream of Pharaoh. So I'm going to blow past the first four words in verse 1. I'll blow past that. We'll hold on to that. We'll get to that in a minute. Does everybody know the dreams that Pharaoh had? Everybody familiar with them? Pharaoh had 2 dreams, and they're super important dreams because he's Pharaoh, and they involve the Nile. And they involve what comes from the Nile. And if you were an Egyptian or you lived anywhere that was on the Nile is the lifeblood of those areas. Without the Nile, without the flooding of the Nile, without that happening every year, none of the cities that lie in the Nile will survive. So he has these dreams, and so quickly. He saw, and so we get the dream twice, and I'm just going to give you the quick one here, and then we'll go to the one that he tells Joseph later on, because it's a little more involved. But he's at the bank of the Nile, and he sees 7 fat cows come out of the Nile River, and they start grazing on the marsh grass. This is a great thing if you're the Pharaoh in Egypt, because you want to see big fat cows coming out of the Nile. This is a positive for you. They existed with wheat and cattle, 2 of the big staples for surviving out there. So to see 7 big fat cows coming out of the Nile, that's outstanding for him. But then to have 7 more scrawny, terrible-looking cows come out and eat the fat cows, that's a bad thing. And that would have woken anybody up. So then he goes back to sleep. He gets a second dream, and he sees these 7 heads of grain on a single stalk, and then 7 more appear that are shriveled, and they consume. And I can't remember what the translation was. I think when they say they ate them up, it was. I think the translation was chewed on both of them, for the cows and the grain. It was chewed unto destruction is what it actually calls it. But so they disappear, right? And then they're gone. So Pharaoh wakes up. He's very disturbed by this dream. Why did God give Pharaoh this dream?
Ultimately to, for his glory, for, the whole Joseph to be, blown
Ultimately,
up.
yes.
It's all the above, but it was,
100%. Yes, ultimately, yes. Why else does he give Pharaoh that dream? Why does he give him a dream at all to talk to Pharaoh?
plus he's the most important guy in Egypt, so.
He is. He is. Is Pharaoh a God worshiper? Is he a worshiper of Yahweh?
No.
Absolutely not, right? They have, I think when I looked at it, it was like 9 main gods in Egypt, but there were thousands of Egyptian gods. And they would kind of come in and out of favor over the years. But there was Osiris and Isis, Ra, Anak, Anuk, a few others. So they worshiped those. They did not worship Elohim. The Elohim was not in their God structure, which Elohim is the kind of generic word for God. And this will come into play in a minute. But so he is not a worshiper. So then why does God give Pharaoh the dream? What other, go ahead, there we go.
Well, the one obvious reason is that how is a guy in prison going to meet the most powerful person in the world? This is God's plan to set up a way for Joseph to meet the Pharaoh.
It is. So why again, though, does God give Pharaoh the dream? I know, this is a hard question. Because I'm looking for a really specific answer. I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm looking for a real specific answer here.
I think so. It's Pharaoh, right? So Pharaoh could make some plans for the future
But that's also it, right?
because they're going to have a famine.
So, wait, go ahead. Here, take one more guess, and then I'll go ahead and give you what I'm trying to get to. Obviously, I'm not getting there the right way.
I believe God's trying to talk to Pharaoh's heart to try to get him to change towards him.
Okay, all right. How else? Go ahead.
Joseph's a dream interpreter, and this is an opportunity for Joseph to have access to the Pharaoh, to do God's will from the dreams he had previous, where Joseph was what you call in charge and the family was bound to him, so it could be done.
How else is God going to get Pharaoh's attention? What other way does he have? What is important in this culture, in the Middle Eastern culture at the time, in Egypt? What was important about dreams? What do they consider dreams to be? But, yes,
That's the way that the communication, divine
that
communication.
was how the gods talked to us, right?
You're safe.
That was almost tragic. So when you wander around, when you talk, you got to make sure everything's out of your way. Otherwise, you're back into stuff. It's not the first time I've done that either. I've knocked over pedestals and all sorts of stuff. So if that's how God had to get to Pharaoh at Pharaoh's level, didn't he? Somehow. Now, if some wise man or some astrologer or some priest comes to Pharaoh and says, hey, listen, I was just thinking, or I was just praying, and this is what I got. Is we really going to get Pharaoh's attention on that? Probably not. So God literally has to come to Pharaoh, a non-believer, a non-God worshiper, and get him the only way he's going to catch Pharaoh's attention, which is with this dream, which then leads to everything else you guys are talking about, right? So, and not only does he give him the dream, but he presents it as, I mean, when you hear this dream, do you look at the dream and say, gosh, that's really hard to figure out. That's way beyond anybody else. Or do you kind of look at it and you go, seems pretty straightforward to me, honestly. Like, I used to have dreams when I was active duty police, right? I would have dreams about getting into shootings, right? And bullets would go, and they drop. And they drop. Those are standard top military dreams. They happen all the time to people who were in my line of work. It was normal. We'd go to work and joke about them all the time. Hey, man, you better go shoot, because obviously you're having a dream. Your subconscious doesn't think you're able to do it right now. That was how kind of we got each other's attention on stuff, right? So Pharaoh, he gets Pharaoh's attention, and the only way to answer that is what? Joseph, this dude right here, right? And this is going to come into play in a minute. Obviously, because God is the architect of everything that's about to happen, right? He's planned this from the beginning. And I don't mean from the beginning of time, I mean from, well let's hang on. The first 4 words in Genesis 41, what does it say? Somebody read me the first 4 words.
2 full years later.
2 full years later. Now, this isn't necessarily like super doctrinally important, but if I tell you I worked for that guy for 2 full years, what am I trying to imply to you? It was all of 2 years. It wasn't a minute less than 2 years, and it was a long 2 years, right? When somebody comes up, when my kids come up and say, I've been studying for 2 whole weeks now, right? They don't want me to think that they like partially studied for 2 weeks. They want me to know the full 2 weeks they've been doing this, right? That's the opening line here. So we get that this is because where did we come from in here, right? Where did we come from in 40, right? The last verse in 40 is, Pharaoh's chief cupbearer, however, forgot all about Joseph, never giving him another thought. That's a tragic line for somebody who, I just hooked you up on this. Dude, I told you, not only did I tell you, but I gave you the good news, right? And then the next line is 2 full years later, you know? That's like we went to commercial, and then it pops back up, and the first thing is 2 full years later, right? Because they want you to know how much time has passed on that. So all this time passes. What happened? So we're going to go back to the beginning. All right, so let's go back to the beginning of this. Let's go all the way back to Joseph and his dad and his brothers back at home. What did Joseph do that was so bad that got his brothers to hate him? You got the mic. Go ahead, tell me.
All right. He basically told them that they would be serving him, or he'd be over authority over them.
Okay, so he told them about his dreams he had, right?
Yep.
I mean, was that enough to really get you? If your sister came to you and said, "Hey, I had this dream. You're going to be worshiping me," is the next thought in your head, "I'm killing her"? No, probably not. Is the second thought in your head, "Wait a minute, I can find some Arab traders and I can sell her into slavery"? Those are probably not the first 2 thoughts that go through your head, right? And I'm not saying that anything that anybody does makes them hate him. People don't make you mad. The Psychology 101. People don't make you mad. You allow yourself to be mad at something someone does. Because I can do something and it won't bother you. But she can do the exact same thing and you're like, "Oh, I hate when she does that." And you're like, "That's the same thing he did." Nothing my wife does aggravates anybody. I got to tell you that right now. Everybody loves her. Nobody likes me. Everybody loves her. I get it. I'm not mad about it anymore. But my brother told me this a long time ago. He said, nobody makes you mad. You allow yourself to be angered by something, and usually it's not realistic, right? Like I said, one person can do the same thing and you're not mad at them about it. But if this person does it, you're just fuming about that. So I'm not saying that anybody did anything that made them hate, right? It's on them, not somebody else. But who really does the work in that gets Joseph's brothers so mad at Joseph? Who's really the culprit in that?
Satan?
Well, okay, yeah, same, but I mean on this
Easy
earth,
answer.
right? But yeah, Jacob, right? He's the one who gives him the coat. He's the one who's got him doing this, and he's checking on him, right? Now, we don't even know if Joseph was happy about that or not happy about it. We don't know. The text isn't clear. But we never get any impression that Joseph was a jerk about it, right? Just his dad treated him that way, okay? And so his brothers hate him. But let's say that you're writing a story, right? You've got this novel going. And I got to get this kid from here all the way over to this point. I have to now be the architect of this story. I have to move this kid from all the way over here, the son of a prominent landowner, bunch of brothers. I got to get him all the way over to Egypt. And it's got to work out exactly. It can't miss. It's got to be exact, right? So what do? Okay, I get his dad to treat him really nicely, and his brothers hate him. So instead of killing him, one of them says, hey, let's get him to the slave traders, and we'll zip, zip, right? Perfect, because if that doesn't happen, this whole thing falls apart, correct? That's number one. This is like the perfect bank heist, right? You got to plan it. This is number one step. This has got to happen. If this doesn't happen, the rest of it doesn't happen. So then he gets sold into slavery, goes to Egypt, and Potiphar buys him, right? And just so we know, he goes to Potiphar's house, and this struck me in both chapters. The Lord was with Joseph, so he succeeded in everything he did. It said in 2 chapters, it specifically says that, right? So he goes to Potiphar's house. He's got to be in Potiphar's house. Can he do what he does eventually from Potiphar's house? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. He can't. God has to have the timing, has to be perfect on this, right? So Potiphar's wife makes an accusation against Joseph because Joseph is young, handsome, and well-built. I understand that. It's a cross that I bear also, right? But Potiphar's wife makes a beef on him, accuses him of a horrifying crime. Not only because he's a slave, but because it was bad, 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 right? If she doesn't do that, if Potiphar doesn't put him in jail, what can't happen? He can't interpret a dream for the baker, and I'm sorry, the baker and the cupbearer, right? Every time I've talked about this, I've come up with the baker and the candlestick maker. I kid you not. It's the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker, and I was talking to my kids about it last night, and I said candlestick maker, and my kids looked at me like I was from Mars. But if he doesn't do that, right, then he's not in position to talk to 2 guys who end up in jail. If he's living in Potiphar's house, he can't do that interpretation. But it had to happen just when it happened. If he goes to jail 2 months later or 6 months later for this, the cupbearer and the baker are already gone. It's a done deal. Nobody knows about Joseph, right? So it has to happen just the way it does. Do you think if God called up Joseph and said, hey, listen, so it's going to work out cool for you, but you're going to be accused of attempted rape, and I'm going to put you in jail. But it's going to work out cool for you in the end. Does anybody think Joseph's like, all right, cool, I'm in on that? No, I'll pass, hard pass on that one. Find me a different way to do it, God, I'm all in, but I ain't trying for that. But it had to happen. The timing had to be perfect. Not only that, when he goes to jail, says it down here. Yeah. And the Lord made Joseph a favorite, but the Lord was with Joseph in the prison and showed him faithful love. It wasn't great being in Potiphar's house. He was still a slave. But he was in charge of Potiphar's house. This is a good thing, right? He doesn't have to worry about food or clothing or anything else because he's in charge of everything. So he's good. And then all of a sudden, now he's in jail. And now he kind of rises up. It ain't great. He's still in jail, but he's in charge of everybody, right? But again, that timing's got to be perfect to put him there. So then, after that, the baker and the cup holder come in, and he does their dream interpretation. And as they're walking out, Joseph's like, hey, listen, man, when you get out, put in a good word with the Pharaoh for me, right? What happens if the cupbearer walks out and says, hey, Pharaoh, so listen, when I was in jail, this kid interpreted my dream for me. It was really cool. The other guy, not so much, but they were true. What if he comes to Pharaoh 2 years earlier and says that? What does Pharaoh say? What do I care? I got magicians, sorcerers, I got all sorts of people that can do that stuff. What do I need with the Hebrew kid, right? Don't need him. And what if he says, you know what though, psh, let him go, cool. Where's Joseph now? Gone. Right? Because if I was Joseph, I'd be like, hey, I gotta go, man. Right? I'm headed back. Anywhere but here. If he's not there, how does Pharaoh find him? He doesn't. The whole thing falls apart if this doesn't happen in specific order and specific timing. God's timing. And I say all this because we don't like God's timing. We don't. All right, God, I've been waiting for 6 weeks on this. 6 weeks? Joseph was waiting 13 years. 13 years to get out. Now, go ahead. Oh,
Yeah, no, I just wanted to kind of add along this line of thinking. It just kind of jumped out to me. It's very interesting to see how oftentimes when God specifically puts a call on someone's life, it's a difficult challenge that God's calling them into. Obviously, even he doesn't share this full out with Joseph, but it made me think of Paul. After he's had his conversion, he's being sent to Ananias, and Ananias gets the vision from God, and this is what God tells him to Ananias to accept Paul. He says, but the Lord said, go, for Saul is my chosen instrument to take my message to the Gentiles and to kings, as well as to the people of Israel, and I will show him how much he must suffer for my name's sake. And you think of too, like the gift of teaching is a wonderful thing, but I'm very thankful that God didn't call me to be an Old Testament prophet.
oh,
right?
oh yeah. No, I'm with you on
the
that.
amount of the calling that God puts on our life, oftentimes, and it's associated with
teaching
suffering.
makes me nervous. Old Testament, no, I'm not doing that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, and look at what Ananias says to him, right? When God calls him, he's like, you, that guy?
Right.
You're sure about that guy? Because he's been killing a lot of us. And God's like, no, yeah, that guy, right? I mean, Ananias was like, oh, really? So, yes, and when he calls, we get called at different spots, right? Joseph, he is all over the map, right? He's got some good spots, he's got some bad spots. He starts as the favorite child, then he ends up in prison, and then later on it's different. But, so all of this happens in perfect timing. And has anybody in here had something bad to happen to them, and then they look around and say, God, what did I do wrong? Anybody? Now, usually, for me, it ain't hard for me to figure out what I did wrong, right? Because I used to do a lot of things wrong, right? But often, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm just there. And how is Joseph? And the Bible says, that God was with him, right? I think God is with me all the time, too. I am not bragging. I just think God's with me. That doesn't mean that every day I wake up and I go, this is a piece of cake. I got this, right? There aren't times where I'm like, really, could we have a cup of coffee and just chit chat about how this is supposed to go? Because I'm not digging this, right? But often we look at our circumstances and we think, what did I do wrong to get here? But this is the perfect example. God's timing has nothing to do with those circumstances or why we think we should or shouldn't be in a spot. We are there specifically because God's timing puts us right there, that minute, that day. If I'd had my way, I would not be standing in front of you right now. If I'd had my way in 1988, I would never have met her. I would have been flying jets. That's all I wanted to do in the world was hit Mach 2 in a fighter jet. That's all I wanted to do. And you know what happened? God reached down, grabbed that rug, and went, zoom. And I hit my head pretty hard, and I was mad. And let me tell you, I was mad at God about that one. I was in Colorado Springs. I was at the Air Force Academy. Are you kidding me right now? I made it. I did all the work I was supposed to do. And then you tell me no? I was, let me tell you, I was mad. I was really mad about that. But I'm not here. I do that, I am not here. I don't meet the love of my life. I don't have my daughters. I don't raise all the girls I raise. I don't, none of that. None of it happens. God's timing, perfect, and put me where I belong. Not where I wanted to be, where I belonged, right? So then, so let me get back to our chapter that we're on. So we get through the dreams, and then the cupbearer comes up, and this is in 9, so Pharaoh calls for all of the magicians and all the wise men in Egypt, right? And Egypt is about 3 million to 4.5 million people, right? Egypt is the place to be at this time, right? As far as cities go, Egypt is one of the powerhouses in the known world at the time, okay? About 3 to 4.5 million people live there. He calls for everybody who's smart and everybody who's religious, right? The president just called for all the pastors to show up and every scientist and smart thinker he can find show up at my place because I need to find out what's going on. And they all show up and go, oh, I don't know. Really? All of you eggheads showed up here and you got nothing. They don't. They have nothing for him. They can't. If they have something, Joseph can't do anything, right? So, but then the cupbearer, and we often think of ourselves as Joseph, right? I'm Joseph and I'm in these bad spots and all that. I got news for you. Sometimes we're the cupbearer too, right? Sometimes we got hooked up, right? God did us a real solid, and we forgot all about that. Now, we whine about the bad stuff, but we forget all the great, incredible things that God does for us, and we don't thank him for it, right? We're just not grateful sometimes. So anyway, the cupbearer says, oh, hey, listen, I forgot all about this guy. He's been rotting in prison for the last 2 years. I thought I'd mention it now. He brings it up, and what does Pharaoh do? Pharaoh sent for Joseph at once. Zip, zip, dude, why didn't you tell me about this today? Let's go, get him. So, goes and gets Joseph. Then Joseph cleans himself up and comes in front of Pharaoh, and Pharaoh says to Joseph, I had a dream last night. No one here can tell me what it means, but I have heard that when you hear about a dream, you can interpret it. Now, Joseph's dad is Jacob. We know all about Jacob, right? All the lying and manipulation, all that, right? Before him was Isaac, who did a bit of lying and manipulating on his own, right? Before him, we had Abraham, did a little bit of lying and manipulating on his own, right? They were always lying to pharaohs, right? What does Joseph do? Now, he's been in jail for 2 years now. He's been a slave for 13. And what does he say to Pharaoh? If Pharaoh wants your dad now, right? You wouldn't even have made it out of the room. You're just dead, right? He says, I heard you can do this. And what's the next thing Joseph says to him? It's beyond my power to do this. I don't know that I would have even let those words get out of my mouth, to be quite honest with you. If I wanted to let him know God could do it, I might have started with God can do it, but I can't. Maybe I would have gone that route. But I never would have said, I can't do that. Because then he says, but God can tell you what it means, and this has set you at ease. The actual Hebrew is give you shalom, give you peace. Does anybody know what happened when Daniel interpreted dreams for Nebuchadnezzar? Daniel interprets dreams for Nebuchadnezzar, right? They're not good. He doesn't bring Nebuchadnezzar any happy news. None, right? He tells him he's going to be living in the woods, barking like a dog. I mean, all sorts of bad stuff, right? Tells him his kingdom's going to fall, blah, blah, blah. He doesn't tell him anything good. But Joseph right there goes, hey, listen, I can't do it. God can, and he'll give you peace. I don't, even if God tapped me on the shoulder and said, I got this one, I'd have been like, man, I don't know that I want to tell him I can guarantee peace, that you're going to be peaceful on this one, right? Because if he doesn't think it's that peaceful, and he hasn't heard the dream yet. Joseph hasn't heard anything yet. He just walked in the door, but what does he have? The supreme confidence in what God's going to do for him, apparently. Either that or he's dumb, right? I told my girls this, we were talking about this last night, I go, he was either gutsy or dumb, right? And they go, yeah, that's kind of a hard thing to say. He will give you shalom. Better hope he's going to give you shalom, because you haven't heard the story yet, right? We used to tell guys in the line of police work, don't tell people you can do anything until you've heard the story first. Once you've heard the story, then you can decide what you can do and not do. But don't be promising things you can't deliver. But he does, right up front. So again, he's either foolish, foolhardy, or and wait, it almost cements it in places we talk later on. Go ahead.
I don't think he's foolish. I just think he knows his God.
Yeah, wait, once I start talking to you about that, once we start digging into this, you're going to be like, he had to. Either that or he's just pushing his luck the whole way through this, but he had to. So then he says, but God can tell you what it means and give you shalom, right? So then Pharaoh tells him the dream, and here's the difference in the dream. And this is why it's kind of important to me, because it's how hard the dream hits him. He tells him the same dream, right? I'm standing at the Nile River. 7 fat cows come out of the Nile River. 7 skinny, scrawny, horrible cows come out and they eat, destroy the fat cows. They ate the 7 fat cows, but afterwards you wouldn't have known if they were still as thin and scrawny as before. Now, it's a weird dream no matter what, right? It's not like a normal dream. And I've had a lot of weird dreams in my life, but this is not a normal dream. But at least if the skinny cows had come up and eaten the fat cows and been fat, Pharaoh would have been like, okay, well, that makes sense, right? They eat the fat cows, now they're the fat cows, it's all good. But they eat the fat cows and then zip, they're back to being the scrawny cows. What happened to the fat cows they eat? This has got to be going through Pharaoh's mind, right? So then he has the 7 heads of grain, full beautiful, shriveled heads, swallow them up. By the way, 7 heads of grain on a stalk of wheat is unheard of. It's like ridiculously a lot. 3 to 5 heads, maybe, but 7. Now, I get it, the number 7 was important in this, but still 7 heads on a stalk of grain, that's a lot of stalks, and it's a lot of heads on grain. And that would have been cool for Pharaoh once he saw that. 7, that's a lot, that's a good harvest. And then the other ones come up and eat them, and that was a really bad harvest, right? So anyway, I told these dreams to the magicians, but no one could tell me what they mean. And then Pharaoh says, hey, listen, why don't I go pray to God, give me a day, I'll be back, and I'll tell you all about it. No, he doesn't. Joseph responded, here it is. Again, If Joseph is bogarting his way through this, if he's bragging, if he's foolish, he's taking a huge risk right now. There's no way he can do this unless God gave him right there and then, or just before then, God had to have said, this is what it is right here. Just say this. Or I'll say it for you. I don't care. But there's no way that Joseph responded. Both of Pharaoh's dreams mean the same thing. God's telling Pharaoh in advance what he's about to do. Not only did Joseph say God can interpret the dream, God will and I can't. He put everything on God. He's the one who can do it. He says, this is what it is. He doubles down on that. So to your point, if he's lying, he can't be now. He's just digging a huge ditch, right? And again, he's saying that God's doing this. So now you're making a giant mistake. If I tell you I can do it, and I'm wrong, okay, I was wrong. Sorry. But if I tell you God's going to do it, and I'm telling you that, and then I screw up, or this is wrong, now I'm telling you that God's wrong, right? Bad. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of what makes Pharaoh unsettled is the uncertainty. He doesn't know why he's receiving these dreams. He doesn't know what's happening. And
Right.
even though it's not the good news that he's hoping to get from Joseph, it's almost like if you've been struggling, like you have like a pain in your side and you don't know what it's from, and it's been going on for weeks, and you keep going to see doctors, and they don't know what's going on. But then finally you go and see a doctor and they say, hey, there's a little bit of a tumor in there, but now we know what it is. It's been diagnosed. The truth has come out, and now you have some sort of peace.
Something.
It's not good news,
Right.
but we can tackle it. And I think
Yeah.
that there's that to that extent, Pharaoh receiving that and knowing that the truth is setting him out of this, and that Joseph is delivering that truth, and there's a peace in truth.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, and as we go through this, so then he tells him real quick, he says, the 7 healthy cows, 7 healthy heads of grain, 7 years of prosperity, right? 7 thin, scrawny cows, 7 thin heads of grain represents 7 years of famine. Does anybody know what the longest famine was in recorded history, that not in this, but in recent recorded history? Great Chinese Famine, 1958 to 1962. Great Chinese Famine, right? 4 years. 4 years. How many people died there? 30 million people died from starvation alone. Another 30 million deaths or births that were terminated or postponed. 60 million on a 4-year famine. Right? Not only that, 60 years down the road, tuberculosis inside of that population is still running rampant just from the malnourishment from that famine alone. 60 years down the road, they're still trashed over that, right? As a 4-year famine. Joseph tells them this is going to be a 7-year famine. Now, if I'm Pharaoh, I'm going, 7 good years, 7 bad years. This is not good. This is not good. But Joseph hasn't told him the good news yet, and he gets to that. But, so then he says, if this would be just as I describe it, for God has revealed to Pharaoh in advance what he's about to do. The next 7 years will be a period of great prosperity throughout the land, but afterwards 7 years of famine so great that all the prosperity will be forgotten in Egypt. The translation is, will be a heaviness, like a heaviness of a mountain on the people. Forgotten in Egypt. Famine will destroy the land. The famine will be so severe that even the memory of the good years will be erased, right? That's bad. As for having, this is an interesting line. As for having 2 similar dreams, it means that these events have been decreed by God and he will soon make them happen. Someone tell me where, we've read all of Genesis. We've read 1 through 40. Somebody please find me in a text where God's ever said that. I've taught a bunch of the chapters in here. I've never seen it. I followed, because I never know if I'm going to be teaching or not, so I followed that. There's nowhere in the text where God ever says, 2 dreams make it a reality. It's decreed by me. So again, either Joseph is full of it or God told him, these 2 dreams I have decreed. And where else have we heard that 2 dream thing? Where else have we heard about 2 dreams? With Joseph. He had 2 dreams, right? He had 2 dreams. One that the sheaves were laying down and one the stars and the moon were all worshiping him, right? He had 2 dreams. Now he's telling Pharaoh that because you had 2 dreams, God decreed it. Think about that for a minute. What did he just tell Pharaoh, and what did God just tell him? Or what did he know in advance? My 2 dreams were decreed. I bet he didn't know that when he was 17. But right now he walks up to Pharaoh and says, because you had those 2 dreams, they're decreed. Because you had 2 of the same dreams. I can tell you right now, I have had 2 of the same dreams. They weren't decreed by anybody, okay? Bad dinner, bad sausage, whatever. But they weren't decreed by anybody. But if you think about them, this kind of struck me. But think about how important that is, that he tells him, as for having 2 similar dreams, it means that these events have been decreed by God and he will soon make them happen. And yet, back then he had 2 dreams a long, long time ago. That had to be a revelation at some point to Joseph. That God told him that he learned that. Now, unless I'm missing something in the translation, I'm just reading you the plain words there. But I thought that was pretty amazing, right? So then, this is kind of brilliant. Therefore, let's see. Oh, also, Joseph tells Pharaoh, God can interpret it, right? He doesn't say Ra can interpret it. He doesn't say Osiris or Isis or any of the Egyptian gods. He says Elohim can interpret it, right? Now, if you're Pharaoh, and I tell you, God can interpret it, but I don't give a God a name, aren't you going to wonder who I'm talking about? He never says Yahweh, don't get me wrong. He doesn't say Yahweh. But in my opinion, Pharaoh had to be like, who God are you talking about? Because I got guys that can talk to all my gods. You're a Hebrew. There had to have been something in Pharaoh's head that at least caught that, because it caught me. I would imagine it would have caught Pharaoh, right? So Pharaoh has to believe at some level, or at least have a suspicion that Joseph's talking about a different God. Anyway, so then he says, Pharaoh should find an intelligent and wise man, put him in charge of the entire land of Egypt. Now, again, Joseph is he interprets the dream, and then he goes on to tell Pharaoh exactly how to run the country. Now, I will grant you that Joseph had some skill running a household and a jail. Okay. He's a low-level manager of a small 3-man facility, right? But now he's in charge of IBM. And he walked into IBM and he said, all right, well, listen, this is how we're going to do it. I have experience doing this stuff. I ran a 3-man outfit back in Topeka, and I got this. But he starts telling Pharaoh, this is what you need to do. Find the intelligent wise men, put them in charge of the entire land of Egypt. And then Pharaoh should appoint supervisors over the land, let them collect 1/5, 20% of all crops during the 70 good years. Did he just pop that up off the top of his head? 20%? Does Joseph know how many people live in Egypt? Does he know what the production is of wheat in Egypt? Probably not. Unless he just happened to be studying it. He doesn't know that stuff. Right? Because if it was me, I'd be like, maybe we should look at about 40%. Maybe 50%. I mean, if we're going to go 7 years good, 7 years bad, maybe we take the top off, take that half, flop it back over to the other half. I mean, it's going to be tight for the first 7, but at least we got some 7, right? We got half for the 7, right? That would have been my theory on that. He doesn't. He says, no, take 20%. Store it and guard it. He mentions guard it too. That's an important thing. Does anybody in here think Joseph on his own is that guy? I sincerely doubt it. I truly believe that God told Joseph at some point in his head, I got this. Don't think, don't do nothing. I will explain it all through you. I got this. I'll tell him the dream. I'll tell him the dream. I'll tell him how to fix it. I'll do everything. Because he lays it all out. And Joseph never says, hey, let me take a minute to go think about this, pray about this. Let me sacrifice something. Let me ask God about it. He doesn't do none of that stuff. Think about that for a minute. He doesn't take a second. I mean, we don't know, but he doesn't like back off and say, let me go check. He just launches into this whole thing and interprets the dream and then tells him what to do to fix it. Not only does he do that, he says, store it away, guard it, so there'll be food in the cities. That way there will be enough to eat. When the 7 years of famine come to the land of Egypt, otherwise famine will destroy the land. Great. So then we move on to verse 37. Joseph's suggestions were well received by Pharaoh and his officials. You really think the officials on their own would have been happy to hear this? I've been working for this guy for 25 years now. And this kid showboats in here and interprets a dream and then tells him how to run the place. And my job just went out the window? On its own, I don't think the officials would have been all that thrilled about this. Again, I see the hand of God throughout this whole thing. Because if I was an official in Pharaoh's employ, I would not have been happy at this point. Because I have been upstaged, outthought, outspoken, outacted, out everything. Because I'd be nervous now about what Pharaoh was thinking about me. That's what I would be. But the Bible says his suggestions were well received by Pharaoh and his officials. So then Pharaoh says, can we find anyone else like this man so obviously filled with the Spirit of God? What God? But he says, filled with the Spirit of God. I don't think any of the Egyptian gods dropped spirit on anybody. So I'm trying to figure out what he knew that I'm not getting out of the text here. But he says it, right? Doesn't this all seem like it had to have been something way bigger than Joseph coming out of jail and plunking this thing down? It just strikes me as it was too big. It was too important. Again, if you'd have left it up to me at 18 years old or 19 years old, 20 years old, however I was in 1988, 21 and 88, yeah, 21 and 88, yeah. If you'd have left it up to me, I would not have made a good decision. I would have made my decision, would have been my decision. I'd have had fun with it, but it wouldn't have been the right decision, okay? So I just don't see that Joseph plunks this down all on his own, out of his own wisdom, his own skill set. I just don't see it. To me, this screams, God had to have made this happen. Timing. But Joseph is faithful the whole time, right? He could have been tempted to say, when Pharaoh says, hey, can you interpret these? I mean, he might have said, well, yeah, sure. I got it. With God's help and all that stuff. But, leave it up to Pharaoh to interpret it, right? But he doesn't. He doesn't. He doesn't hem and haw over it. His ancestors aren't lying to Pharaoh. He doesn't. He straightforward says, nope, can't do it. He does it. I'm just here. I'm on the show. So, again, I think this is, we see something bigger at play here. So then, since God has revealed the meaning, clearly no one else is as intelligent as wise than you are. You will be in charge of my court. All the people will take orders from you. Only I, sitting on my throne, will have a rank higher than you. So then, Pharaoh goes ahead, and he kind of Egyptianizes Joseph, right? He dresses him in the fine linens. I'm assuming they're the fine linens of the Egyptian culture, right? Of royalty in the Egyptian world, right? I'm guessing he didn't throw Hebrew stuff on the guy, right? He dressed him up in Egyptian finery, right? Because it says, remove the signet ring from his hand, place it on Joseph's finger, signet ring, Egyptian power, right? Place it on Joseph's hand. dressed him in fine linen clothing, hung a gold chain around his neck. Would have been an Egyptian thing, right? Was not his native land anything. Then puts him in the chariot reserved for the second in command. Everyone, the commander shouted, kneel down whenever he goes past, right? So he was in jail this morning. This afternoon, he's wearing a signet ring, and everybody's got to bow down when he drives past in a chariot. This is an amazing, 6-7 hours that just passed. This is pretty amazing stuff, right? But he Egyptianizes him. He gives him all this stuff, and gave him a new Egyptian name, right? Zephanath-Paneah. And I'm going to say that's a pretty good translation of pronunciation of it. I don't know. Probably Steve can pronounce it better than I. Probably anybody can pronounce it better than I can. But then he gives him a wife whose name is Asenath. She's the daughter of Potiphar, not Potiphar, Potipharah, and that R-A at the end of it means of Ra. So he is a priest of Ra, the god, the Egyptian god. That's the Ra at the end of Potiphar. Ra's name means of Ra. So he's a priest of Ra, right? Gives him an Egyptian wife from a priest, an Egyptian god priest, right? Really Egyptianizing him, right? Go ahead. Got it?
Yeah, no, at the bottom of the page, it says Zephaniah Paneah probably means God speaks and lives. It says it at the bottom.
Oh, yeah, no, his
Bible,
name,
yeah.
yeah, God speaks and lives,
His
right?
new name, yeah.
So he gives him this Egyptian, he does all this stuff to Egyptianize Joseph. Joseph is still a Jew, he's still a Hebrew, right? But he gives him all this stuff. Again, Joseph went from nothing. He went from being a rich kid in a house to less than nothing, to being second in command in one of the major cities in the known world at the time. It's stunning. And yet, the whole time, we never read anything where Joseph is like, hey, God, this kind of sucks right now. Can you hook me up on this? I don't like this. I'd rather do it this way. We don't see any of that from Joseph, do we? And the beauty is that when we talk about it, again, don't we sometimes put where we are and trade that for who we are in God? You know what I mean? Who we are in God is not dependent on our position in life. Joseph is exactly where he needs to be every moment, every day of this entire story. He is exactly where he is supposed to be, right? And yet we complain when things go wrong. Am I done? Yes, I'm done. Anyway, so then he has two sons. He has Manasseh, which means God make me forget all my troubles and everyone in my father's family. Ooh. Good that he forgot, bad that he's trying to forget his father's family, but I get it, right? But he remains faithful to God in the naming, right? God made me forget. Not anybody else's God, not Pharaoh, not anybody else. God made me forget. And then Ephraim, for he said, God has made me fruitful in this land of my grief. God. So even though Pharaoh makes him in charge of Egypt, he always looks back to God. And it's kind of one of the first times where we've seen this all the way through the storyline. He's constantly, and I don't like taking any of the patriarchs and glazing them too well. I don't want anybody to think that he's perfect by any stretch. He's not. But he's really one of the solid good guys in here. And yet, if you look at Hebrews, where it talks about the faithful, he's not even mentioned for this part of it. He's mentioned for saying that they were going to leave Egypt and told him to take his body with him. Go ahead and look it up when you have a chance. he's not credited for all of his faithfulness here, really. I mean, he's credited for the later on stuff, but this is pretty faithful stuff here. And he doesn't get any credit for it in the Hebrews, which I thought was interesting. But, so real quick, so then 7 years of bumper crops, 7 years of famine, struck all the surrounding countries, but throughout Egypt there's plenty of food because at one point there, he stopped keeping records because there was too much to measure. He had so many crops that he brought in. The famine also struck all the surrounding countries, but throughout Egypt there was plenty of food, all the surrounding countries. And when the people cried out to Pharaoh for food, he told them, go to Joseph, do what he tells you. So when severe famine everywhere, Joseph opened up the storehouses, distributed grain to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe throughout the land of Egypt. Verse 57 is our what's it called? Not a transition, but what is it called when it tells us the future line in the huh? Yeah, starts with a P. Yeah, the thing starts with a P. Foreshadowing, of course. It's exactly what I meant. Well, no, foreshadowing was right. No, yeah, foreshadowing. There's foreshadowing right here. And people from all around came to Egypt to buy grain for Joseph. People from all around came to buy grain from Egypt from Joseph because this famine was severe throughout that world, right? And then we're going to see then more of this timing, right? This incredible timing on God's part. So we went over. So whoever's going to teach next week is going to have to cut it short by like 25 minutes. Thank you, Lord, for tonight. Thank you for showing me what you show me whenever I do this. Thank you for teaching me. Thank you for the opportunity, Lord. Thank you for the people in this church who come to hear me talk, who come to hear me speak. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And I thank you for everything you do. I pray you would be with us tonight. Keep us safe in your hands. Give us all a safe drive home. Pray this all in your name. Amen.